I'm Larry J. Feldman, owner of Career Changers USA, and I want to talk about 4 disparate characters that actually had a bunch of stuff in common. Charlie Brown, Spiderman, Mother Teresa, and Elvis Presley. And I know you're thinking, wow, that's a pretty diverse group. But let me show you what they all kind of had in common. All 4 of them, all icons obviously, some imaginary, some very, very real, were plagued by self-doubts and insecurities that propelled them but also held them back. Charlie Brown was created by Charles Schulz, who created obviously the entire Peanuts comic strip, and he put all his childhood insecurities and problems into the character of Charlie Brown. And Charlie Brown expected things to go wrong. He always doubted himself. He never thought he was good enough, and of course that even became a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't know anyone that ever grew up reading Peanuts that didn't wince every time Lucy pulled the football away just as Charlie Brown was going to kick it, after she promised this time she'd hold it till he could kick it. Again, living proof of what happens when we expect the worst. A lot of time that's what we get. Spider-Man was developed by one of the great creative geniuses, in my opinion, of last century, Stan Lee. Stan Lee read the Bible and grabbed that part out that said, to those that much is given, much is expected. And he turned that around for Spider-Man to mean, with great power comes great responsibility. Now, what was wrapped up in that? Spider-Man was Peter Parker, a kind of a bookish high school kid, kind of quiet, and he was bitten by a radioactive spider. Well, it imbued him with these incredible powers, strength, agility, superhuman. His family was not great financially. He had his Aunt May, his Uncle Ben, and he decided, I'm going to make money. You know what? I could be a very successful wrestler with this strength and this agility. So he fashioned a mask, did a match, got paid. He obviously was very successful. But on the way out, a burglar ran by him. And a cop said, stop that guy. And he kind of did a Freddie Prinze, if you're old enough to remember Chico and the Man, not my job, man, and let him go. He could have easily stopped him. Well, this gets uglier because that same burglar killed his beloved Uncle Ben, which, man, it just set him on a course of always feeling guilty because he knows he could have simply stopped this and avoided this tragedy, which affected him, his Aunt May. He carried it with him forever, and it propelled him to always try to do the right thing. Mother Teresa, how much more of a devout figure could you have? I mean, she was canonized as a saint. Her whole life was about helping people, trying to put herself in a position where she could do good. And yet even she had multiple crises of faith where she doubted, am I good enough? Am I doing what the Lord expects me to do? Am I up to it? You would never think someone like that wouldn't be on a path where it was clear what they were doing made sense. Then we jumped to Elvis Presley. I'm a rock and roll musician. I've spent considerable time thinking about Elvis and watching him play. I mean, undeniably, here was a guy that was movie star quality handsome, unbelievable charisma, and a magnificent singing voice. Yet he was so riddled with insecurity that he tied himself to Colonel Parker. Colonel Parker took half of his income on every single thing he did. He also prevented him from doing multiple great songs because the proviso was, if you want my boy, that's what he called Elvis, my boy, to sing your song, I want half your publishing. And so many people said, I'm not doing that. But yet he still felt he would fall apart if the Colonel wasn't with him. I mean, it's scary. I mean, how much more talent could a person be? This is what happens when self-doubt's bordering on the imposter syndrome. I mean, we've all felt it a little bit. Gosh, I hope nobody realizes I'm not good enough to do this. How did I get here? Boy, it had to be lucky. These things stop us in life. Hey, they even put the brakes on these great icons at certain times. We need to understand that everything we're going through can have a purpose if we lend it a purpose. That if we understand, hey, this is what I've accomplished. Now, these are the things I haven't accomplished, but that's perfect. That gives you hope of more things to come, more things to attain. That should get people excited rather than be negative about it. We have to understand what we're capable of. And nobody's capable of everything, right? It almost wouldn't be fun. And if you get too upset or too worried about what you're stumbling over, hey, if it makes you feel any better, in 100 years we'll all be dead and none of this will matter. Come to think of it, that might not be the most encouraging statement, but we'll move on from there. I mentioned I'm a musician. Let me talk about another musician, apart from those wonderful four. John Lennon, how much more talented could a human being be? You talk about a guy that thinks out of the box. Brilliant, brilliant songwriter, but I love his voice. He's on everybody's list, top 10 of the world's greatest rock and roll singers ever. Everybody loved his voice except one person, John Lennon. He was so concerned that he didn't think his voice sounded good to him that he constantly harangued George Martin, the Beatles producer, to put effects on, to change, to whatever, double it up, whatever you could possibly do. You'd figure if there's one guy that wouldn't be real insecure, it would be John Lennon. But let's keep in mind that at the height of Beatlemania, the song he wrote was Help. There's a message in there. We have to understand that the negatives that we pull into our lives, in a lot of instances, are things we pull in. Yeah, there's always certain things that are going to be thrust upon us that we can't help. People get sick. Unfortunately, people die. Bad things happen. But once we start to accentuate the positives and understand what we are capable of, we're capable of just about everything. Remember, everything's impossible until the minute that it happens. I love to ask when I get younger people I'm training what penicillin was derived from. After I get a couple silly answers, I explain it was moldy bread. Change the world. Everything's possible once we start looking at what we're capable of achieving if we stop stopping ourselves, if that makes any sense. Oscar Wilde said it beautifully. He said, be yourself. Everybody else is taken. Understand you are who you are and you are where you are. Doesn't mean you have to stay there. Doesn't mean you can't improve. But it's crucial to understand that life is an unlimited opportunity as long as we let it be. We have to understand the potential we have, what we're capable of doing, and really just stop beating ourselves up. I mean, aspire to be as good as you can be, but don't beat yourself up because you think you're not as good as everybody else. Because guess what? Everybody else basically has the same thoughts you do. I've never met any human being that doesn't have some doubts. And by the way, when you hear people really being out front and bragging and being super confident, those are usually the people with the most self-doubts. Okay? They're just trying to cover up their insecurities by overcompensation. Understand that there's not a whole lot you can't accomplish as long as you stop telling yourself, I can't accomplish that. I have faith in all of you. I'm sure you can overcome. Heck, maybe you can even outdo Mother Teresa and Elvis Presley if you have the right idea. I'm Larry Feldman, and thank you so much for listening to my Larry Talks.